Hey, Kate. Kate is one of our amazing REDCap crew, and so she's gonna kind of lead us through the orientation. Are you gonna share your slides, Kate?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just making
Okay,
sure I have
great.
the right screen set up, and I'll share really shortly.
Great,
Thank you all for letting us be here today and for your patience as we got different pieces of this together. Today, Becca and I will probably tag team a bit and welcome your questions along the way. So can you see my slides and hear me okay? Great. Thanks, Jane. All right. So we're going to talk through this in a couple of different ways. First, we're going to talk about the system overall. Actually, really quick, can I get a show of hands of who here is familiar with REDCap and has used it before? Okay. Okay, good. So there's generally people that have been in the system before. So we'll talk a little bit about the system overall, and then we're going to walk through kind of very module 2 specific activities that have to happen at each of the different points in the process from the kitchen's perspective. Of course, I think Becca and Beth helped us frame this, so we'll tag team this as we go through. Any questions before I get started from the group? If not, I'll jump right in. Okay, great. So overall, module 1 project is going to be separate from the module 2 and 3 project. So there is a workflow that I think is mostly going to be managed by the coordinators on getting the participant from module 1 to the module 2 and 3 project. And within that space, there are 3 arms. So the first arm is kind of a screening arm where they first get put is the wrong word, but the first place that their data gets so that person can go through the consenting process. The reason for that is we understand people might be still making decisions and they may need to consider module 2 and 3 at this point. So it's a good space where someone can start in this part of the system and work through the consent and decisions about which module is going to be right for them. Then arm 2 will be module 2, and after consent, basically the participant gets moved to arm 2. They will always exist in arm 1 and arm 2 if they participate in module 2. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. I'm sorry, I think I deleted a slide, but at a high level, basically, they go through consent. We have this form called module start that when that's initiated, they would move over to arm 2, and all activities eligibility through finishing the module would happen in arm 2, and everything consent and prior is in arm 1. So hopefully that is helpful. So really quickly, as you go into the system, if you've used it before, you might be very familiar with the record status dashboard, which will show you the projects. You can navigate between the arms from this view, and it will show you all the participants. When you click into one participant, as you can see here on the screen, it will take you to the record homepage, and that is the view of just that participant and where they are. You can see here that there are some circles that are sort of grayed out and some that are not, and that is sort of how we work within the system, where we have logic that will show or hide forms based on the data that's been entered, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But there's a workflow through the system where you can't get to certain forms until certain actions are completed, and so that's going to be an important part of the process. And I see there's a question. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, thank you. I wanted to know if their ID is going to stay the same as it's been in module 1, because we've sort of been tracking them using that short identifier. Same
ID, same device IDs, wherever possible.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of examples. Yeah, for example, the ASA 24, the prefix text will be slightly different, but wherever possible, it's the same IDs between module 1 and 2.
Great.
Great question. Okay. So yeah, that's just a little bit about navigation. When you get into the system, you'll probably get more acquainted with this view, but we do recommend, we think it's clean to go into this record homepage and you can kind of get a good picture of where they are in the module. We wanted to take a quick moment to talk about the user-facing tools and systems. This is a change from Module 1 for those of you who are aware of Module 1, where the interface that the participant works in now has a couple of additional features that we wanted to highlight here briefly. It will by default, well, I'll first say that each participant will have an individualized link that is associated with them that gets emailed to them as part of the normal reminder process and reminder system. And that same link will be used for them throughout the module. And you know, we'll also show you how you can always get that link for them if they're having trouble accessing it or if something happens. But this link will contain more information than it did in Module 1, so we'll take a moment to talk about that. So by default, the link will take them to their surveys to complete space, and that's anything that they need to complete. What you can see here on the screen is as if they completed everything, but it would have sort of their to-do list there of different forms that are available to them. And there are triggers in the system to allow the coordinators to control when surveys are given to them. And that is a slight change from Module 1 as well. I think we allowed more sort of coordinator-driven actions to put those forms into the queue, so you always know when they're there or not there. The second new feature is now they'll have an upcoming appointments place they can click, and this will be a table of everything entered into the diet period gateways. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but that diet period gateway is going to come up and up if you haven't heard it already, which you probably have. But that diet period gateway information will be reflected here for the participant to go back to whenever they need to. And this is updated in real time. There's also this menu option might take a little bit more training with the participant, and by default, they never have to come here by themselves to find a daily reminder. But this is kind of a place where any of the daily reminders they've received could be accessed if you needed to. So you could work with the participant to find the daily reminder language if you needed to, but really the specific screen of the daily reminder will get directly linked to the participant through the process in the system. But there's a place here now in the interface where they could get back to any reminders they received. Additionally, there's contact information to just make it a little bit easier for them to get to. And this agreements will allow them to see any consents that they have completed in the process. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but wanted you all to know that it was a little bit, there were more functionality for the users for their interface than there were in Module 1. This here is a screenshot where it shows for any survey for a participant, if you clicked into it and it was accessible to you, you could click on survey options and click the survey queue button, and that would get you the link that they get. So it's fairly easy to get to. This is also written up in the MOP, but we just wanted to let you know that there's multiple ways to get this link for folks that might not be as technically savvy or having trouble with the automated system. Okay, questions before we jump into visit one specific aspects? Okay, this is probably what we're all waiting for. So we'll get into the fun part. Fun is relative, but this part. Okay. And apologies. I think this version doesn't have the image, so we'll have to circulate the one that does have the image. So forgive me for that. But step one, prior to visit one, the part 2 diet screeners have to be completed. Now, it's really important. This is actually in Module 1, as I think everyone knows. So the first step for any of these participants is going to be completing, or in some cases recompleting, but in most cases completing the part 2 diet screener. Obviously, that data and that information is really critical. So going back in, completing that process is going to be really important so that we have that physical activity level and all of that other good stuff that's in those forms that you know about. From there, then there's a Module 2 and 3 recommendation form where there's information about which module they're most interested in or most recommended for, what site they're going to be aligned with. And there's a functionality on that form where you check a box and hit save, and it creates their record in Module 1. Now, Becca, that's an activity the coordinators are going to be completing. Okay, great. So
I think so.
Yeah, great. So 2 parts of Module 1 that has to happen before they get to Module 2, this part 2 diet screener, and then this Module 2 and 3 recommendation form. So we'll work together with you guys to make sure that that's clear, but that recommendation form is really going to drive the data being pushed over to the Module 2 and 3 system. On that form, which I can add another slide into here as a follow-up, it has also the ability to see all the data that's being pushed over so that you can take a quick look to make sure that what's being sent matches what you expect, to do a quick QC and sanity check.
Kate, I think also, so in that part 2 diet screener, there's the, like one of the last questions is like, you know, do you recommend this person for a module or something like that? And you rate them like red, yellow, green.
Yes.
And that information will be moved into that recommendation form as well.
Correct. Yeah, that is going to be key information that gets sent to module 2 as well. It's one of the fields, so that as somebody's prioritizing and working through participants, they'd be able to look at that information to figure out who they might want to target for consents and so on and so forth. So yeah, good call out. Okay, so prior to visit 1, this diet period gateway form is going to be really critical. It's a major change from module 1 as well, where really all scheduling and all information used for the reminder system, used for all sorts of aspects of the system are driven from this important form. So here's where you're going to put the important information, visit 1 and visit 2. It will calculate or show a calculation of what 6 months is from visit 1 at each diet period. So that just is a helpful reminder. There are some pieces here about sending a visit 1 confirmation after you enter the information. These buttons need to be pushed to initiate this process. And I think that's more of a coordinator driven activity, but y'all can tell me if that's not the case. And there's the ability to resend the survey queue if someone's having trouble, as you can see here on the screen. And then it's really important that all of the meal pickup data is entered in here, as well as when the CGM is applied. There's logic in the system that bases when certain diet, for example, if they end up doing ASA 24, which they may not in most cases, the ASA 24s will be shown based on the CGM application date because those two things are tied in the dietary assessment schedule, for example. So it's really important that this data be accurate and up to date. And at the top of it, you'll also see a history of what has been sent to the participant as a result of the iterable notification system. So there will always be a lot of information here, maybe too much, but hopefully it will end up being a useful resource to help manage the entire diet period. And this will be, for each diet period, there will be a form for that specific diet period. Okay, anything else here we'd want to touch on, Becca?
I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is also where you can see what diet color the person is starting on.
So we can pipe that here. That's actually on the planned foods table. But you have to put visit 1 and save, and that initiates, and right now it's a nightly job because we wanted to give flexibility on if this needed to change within the same day. But overnight, what will happen is that date will get pulled. It will get assigned to the cohort based on the different tables that you all have access to, and it will put into what's called the planned foods table, the diet color and the meals. Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a future slide, I believe. But
so
go ahead.
I don't want to confuse people from the data aggregate, but I was under the impression that the planned food tables wasn't something the kitchens would actually be filling out. It's just kind of an automatic thing that feeds into the food replacements. Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit. I'll spend some more time on that, I think. Okay. But go ahead with your question.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, if there's any way to put the color pair the color with the visit 1, 2, 3 gateway, I think that would be extremely, or diet 1, 2, 3. If there's some way to put the color, I would vote for that. But anyway, my question is on this meal pickup delivery schedule. So, you know, so say it's the beginning of the diet period, the coordinator punches in these dates, and then, oh, something changes, you know, oh, on the 4th, they have to change to the 16th. When that is changed, is there, do the notifications automatically then change?
Yes. So, yes, I'll double check if there's any additional action, but once it's updated in this form and the form is saved, that will automatically inform iterable to make a change. So that's a good question. Okay. So, all right, the visit gateway. So there's the diet period gateway where it's all the logistics. Now, and we can pipe in the color. Now, it's notable that the color will be on that delay because the pipeline runs currently overnight. You can also reach out to us and we can run it in real time for you at any point. But right now it's a nightly job. We could also change it to be hourly or something like that. And we welcome your feedback on the frequency that would be best. But there might be a slight delay between when you save this and when the color appears. So it wouldn't automatically show up again because we have a lot of database work that connects would run outside of REDCap. So there's a second form called the visit gateway form. And here you can see that we pipe in a lot of the relevant information from the diet period gateway. So the visit 1 date, the CGM application date, the discontinue status, which hopefully will be blank in most cases, visit 2 date, diet assignment, number of days in the diet period. So it tries to give a little condensed version of what's been entered. And it has a couple of those access fields that I had mentioned earlier, where when you or the coordinator are working with the participant and you're ready to release the dietary assessments, you check this box, you save the form, it will release it to their survey queue. You could also do all 3 of these steps at once, but in case there's nuance to the visit, that means you're only doing parts of it. You have control over what goes into their queue or stays. Yeah. And so, yeah, the key information is that it'll show some key information entered on the diet period so that if you see something that's off, you could go back and make changes. And it provides these fields. There's also some quick dietary assessment text and guidance on, basically it aligns with the CGM, trying to help just reinforce the protocol. And there's a place to put progress notes, which are sort of operationally whatever you want them to be. It could be a way that you and the coordinators communicate. You could leave a note, don't forget to do XYZ and log it in this table. That's not shown here on the screen, but that's the very bottom of the form is this progress notes table that you can add to. So diet period gateway, visit gateway, slightly different purposes. We considered combining them, but it was already a pretty overwhelming form. And so that's kind of why we broke them out separately. Okay, and let me just look ahead really quick because we did some changes. Okay, we're getting to the planned foods table later. Great. So prior to visit 1, it's also important to complete the coffee and tea form if needed. And so using the data from the part 2 screener, that can be very helpful here. And it'll be helpful to fill it out at the beginning of each diet period to say what coffee and tea is going to be relevant for them for that diet period. And is there anything else on this one, Becca?
No, I know that's kind of worded weird, that it says, was the participant provided any coffee or tea? It should be more like, would the participant like any coffee or tea?
That's a good point.
I don't know if we'll be able to adjust that wording, but just keep in mind that this is used to feed into the adherence log. And so if a participant is receiving coffee or tea, you must select these so it will feed into the adherence log so that they'll get the right beverages that are being served to them. Same with the creamer and the sweetener. So it does sound like it already happened, but it didn't. This is just to inform kind of that process going forward.
And we should be able to change that text label, Becca. So good, very good call out. It is worded kind of strange. Okay. Also a really critical form is the food replacements log. So when you go in, you don't have to fill out this form. Let me say that. So if this participant doesn't require any replacements, you leave this form be, you never have to touch it. But this form is loaded in with each approved swap. And so when you open it up, it will default to the regular menu, and you can change the drop down to find the correct replacement. And we do ask that you do this in the beginning because it covers sort of every diet color, and it's sort of helpful to have it one and done. But you could go back to this before the next diet period and make changes. The reason this is important is in the next step when a couple of processes run, this form is referenced to pull in these food swaps to load in the dietary adherence data or the dietary adherence forms for the participant. So we do ask you do this as soon as you can. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So another key form is called the planned foods form. So this is where your diet color will live. We can take this information and pipe it anywhere. So as you're working through this, if you see another place, it'd be really helpful to have, the diet color, put wherever it needs to be. That would be an easy change for us to make. So definitely let us know that. But this is where it lives in the database from our perspective. So it says diet period assignment, and it will be loaded in through a nightly process. And let me take a step back. So there's 2 different steps in the system. And I don't want to get into too much detail about this, but I think you'll see why it's important we talk about how it's 2 steps, because it helps us in the future think about when things change, what do we do? So step 1 is we take that visit 1 date, we compare it to the data we have on file about which cohort that maps them to, and therefore what diet assignment they have. And the color gets loaded in, as well as it takes into account the number of days that have been entered on the diet period gateway, because it's really important the order of the days leading up to the DSMT. So it factors all that in. It loads in the color and the meals. So we have a second process that runs. Right now it runs hourly. So overnight, this would get loaded in. While you're asleep, the second step would happen, where it looks at the information in here, it looks at the color, it looks at the meals, it looks at the food replacements, and it loads in the foods. So in most cases, what we hope is you will come in here the next day and take a look and make sure everything looks good, but you won't have to enter anything is our goal. Now, the one exception is for if you needed to add additional foods or things like that. For version 1, you would have to go in here and add an edit, and you can add a couple of other pieces here. But the goal is that you have to do as little as possible, and that these 2 processes that run will load this information. So the reason I mentioned these 2-step processes is, let's say all of a sudden something changes, we need to change this person to orange. You would log a ticket. We would very easily sort of delete these tables, change the color to what it needs to be. We can rerun that second process, and it will load in the foods according to the new data that's been entered. And so I hope I'm not getting too far into the weeds, but what I'm trying to say is I think we're setting it up so that we can be flexible, because we've realized things will probably happen and we'll need to make changes. And Chelsea, go ahead. And I can't hear you, Chelsea, if you're trying to chime in. But I see you trying to unmute.
While she's trying to unmute, Kate, can you just, so the, oh yeah, she's wanting to know if we can add unit foods.
Yes, so that would be the step you'd have to actually add to these tables, and we can write out in the mop exactly how that works. So that part, adding unit foods, I think would be the only piece here where you'd have to come in and edit these tables, and we'll write out in the mop exactly, the process for that.
Okay. Sure. But so generally though, the kitchen staff, their job is to just come in here and look to make sure this looks right most of the time. They don't need to do anything else.
That's correct. Yes.
Okay. Unless they need to add unit foods, and you'll write instructions on how to do that.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So once you start going through the testing, hopefully believing will be, seeing is better than believing. And so, but we've done a lot of testing with this where we're really hoping that it's just reviewing, not anything else. Like Becca said, for most commonly, assuming things are going to plan. Now, if we learn from y'all that, what we think is most common is not most common, we want to know about it so we can make changes and adjustments if we need over time. But for launch, this is how it will work. Okay, so that's probably the most complicated thing we're going to talk about. And again, I welcome questions either now or as a follow-up, because I'm sure this part is going to be what everyone has a lot of, wants to make sure this is done correctly. Hold on, my slides are not advancing. Okay, so another key prior to visit 1 form is the energy calculation form. So, and Becca, I know there might still be some feedback on this form, and so I think we can still talk through that. But the way this works right now is that there are 3 sections of the form. The first section is going to show you the data we received from module 1 for each of these categories, just for reference. The second area is a place where we will default the information to what we got in module 1, but it is editable. So that is entirely because we understand there's some nuance and there might be changes. And so the second part of it, you can make adjustments for many different circumstances where you might need to, or very specifically in the case where the data we have for sex at birth, it actually has 5 different responses on the questionnaire, but the calculations expect a binary male or female. So that's a place where you are working with the participant and you can make that decision on which one is more appropriate for them and enter that data. Once you enter the data in section 2, section 3 will do the calculations for you and will show the Mifflin if needed, and give you that information you need to do the energy calculation. So that is how this form works. And Becca, I welcome your thoughts.
Yes, so it is intended that hopefully you won't have to make many edits to this. So, you know, the goal is that we can like pull in as much information from module 1 as possible so that we can do this energy calculation. You're definitely going to have to select male or female. If you select female, some additional questions are going to come up. And so that's one thing that's going to be a little bit challenging is, you know, this energy calculation, we know that you all need this information to prepare the meals ahead of time. And if a participant, so if you select female, the questions that come up are you pregnant and are you breastfeeding? And of course, those questions are asked in module 1, but if somebody is starting in module 2, their status may have changed, right, with pregnancy and lactation. And they could be in a different week of pregnancy, or they could be, you know, newly pregnant or whatever. And so that's going to affect their energy calculations. So it's intended that really you're going to use the initial calculations or the initial measurements from module 1 to determine the energy needs for that participant for you to prepare the meals. However, you might need to make adjustments, and I know we're still kind of figuring out what the best way is to do this, but you might need to make adjustments on that visit 1 day to, if somebody is pregnant or is lactating, you might need to make adjustments to their energy or to their meals to account for that extra energy for that first round. I definitely see, Callie, I'm totally confusing you.
This is an area that's really been stumping me because like I'm imagining our participants from July or whatever, and then, you know, we're starting to feed them in February. Like I don't really see how between the A1C, the new hemoglobin, the weight, the pregnancy, how we don't have to have a visit 0.
So,
but I also
no, you're okay.
No, go ahead.
Right, finish what you're saying. I was saying I left out a key part. Is that this module 1 information should be used only if it's been less than 3 months since module 1. If it's been more than 3 months, then we need new information. We need a new weight, we need a new height, and we need, well, not a new height, but we need a new activity factor.
Is there a REDCap for a visit 0, or are we just filling this stuff out, you know, then?
There's not a visit 0 that specifically. That said, I'll have to revisit Becca. I don't know if you know off the top of your head. I can stop sharing to look again at this specific question, because I know there's been a lot of very late breaking conversations about this.
The other scenario I can envision, I mean, to me, a visit 0 seems really, really important. The other scenario I envision is that we've done all the screening, we've made all their food, we've we're ready to see them. They come in to pick up their food. If we were to test their A1C or hemoglobin then, and we're like, oh, you know, because we would have no clue, like if for module 1, if someone has you know, blood sugar over 300, like we wouldn't really have any way of knowing that. And so then we're in a situation where we're like, go home, we can't feed you, and we will, you know what I mean? So there just seems to be like a lot of different scenarios where getting that cleared up before we like prepare this whole thing would make sense. So.
And I see Carolyn might be, go ahead, Carolyn.
No, I just want to reiterate that really, I think how we envision this to flow through your sites is that they really have to be determined to be eligible before you can even think of scheduling them and moving forward and having their meals prepared, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're preparing all these meals and then they're not eligible. So there needs to be a lot of work done to get them to make that determination. And even before then, you might do that over the period of more than one kind of visit or touch point. and it can begin as early as the visit 2 of module 1. Granted, it's been a while since these folks have been in your clinic, so it's likely that you need to bring them in for a screening visit to do those procedures.
Okay, got it. So I mean, that is what we were assuming. I just wasn't sure because there wasn't like a specific REDCap language around that, but I yeah, I agree with you.
That's a good point. There is an eligibility visit. That said, I guess I was thinking, for diet period 2, there is not. So I mean, because they're already kind of eligible. So we may need to think about that.
That's a good point, depending on how much time passes. Yeah, all right.
But yeah. I think though, we did try to make this form more of a workbook so that there are going to be factors that we can't predict. And this will allow you to do the calculations based on the information that's most relevant. And if we need to revisit some of these other pieces, we certainly can, if you think that's fair, Becca.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And, we kind of, Kate definitely, if I'm wrong on this, it's kind of set up this way right now. And I think there's some things that we're not going to know how to set them up best until we're actually in it. Right. And so this might be one of those situations where, oh, well, it really makes more sense if we do X for the energy calculations. And we could probably make those adjustments in the future.
Yeah.
That's accurate to say, Kate.
Absolutely. Yeah. All of these systems, this is version 1, and we expect that we'll get feedback. And sometimes there's, obviously for module 1, we had the module 2 launch that NIH prioritized, but yes, we want to work with you and make it work for you. So when it's a quick change, we'll try to make it as quickly as we can. And if it's a bigger change, we'll put it on the list and see if we can get it changed. So true, as long as we get permission to do it and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm going to go to the next report. So then obviously, also prior to visit 1, preparing the meals based on all of that good information that you have. And I'm going to go to the next slide unless Becca signals otherwise. Okay.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Great. So that's all the pre-visit 1 prep focused activities that lead the system up for success for moving forward. So visit 1 activities, of course, weighing the participant. So there's a weight M2 form where you enter the participant's weight. And this will be repeated at every pickup. Revisiting the energy calculation form to make any adjustments. And Becca, I'll let you say more here.
Yeah, so again, we've been really trying to think through the whole process with the energy calculation form. So it's going to be something that's going to have to be kind of visited multiple times, not all the time, but multiple times, right? So definitely before the participant comes in, so you can get a sense of what calorie level to prepare the meals at. And then here on visit 1, in case there's any adjustments that need to be made. So if it's been greater than 3 months since the last weight has been taken, or if the participant is pregnant or lactating, there's a chance that you might have to make like in the moment adjustments by like giving unit foods or something like that to the participant until the next meal pickup. So the energy calculation form isn't something that you're going to have to revisit every time a participant comes in. It's really just kind of that prior to visit 1, and then the beginning of the next diet period. So visit 3, is that what it is, Kate? Yeah, visit 3 and then visit 5.
Yes.
So basically the visit 1 of diet period 2 and the visit 1 of diet period 3, you'll want to revisit the energy calculation form.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah, the daily adherence log will then start to be active once they are getting food. And I think this is just a note here that when you're working with them, we want to remind and enforce them about the diet adherence log. They will be also getting daily reminders, as well as I think a follow-up if they haven't completed it. So this is a view of the form where it loads in the foods from that planned food series of tables, and they get a chance to tell tell us collectively if they ate all the foods, and if not, how much subjectively for each of those unit food items. Also providing the meals. I'll let Becca say more here.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah,
that's
so
fine.
you'll of course provide the meals, and along with that, we have, this participant facing handout that you guys have done a great job reviewing. But now we have it in the beautified version, and of course this can be found on the website. You can just print it out from there. But the goal is to provide this with them, with the participant when you provide them those meals.
Great. Okay, so now we get into the meal pickups after the first one, where the reminders are sent based on what's in the diet period gateway form, reinforcing kind of what we talked about before. And they will get a pickup reminder the day before the scheduled meal pickup. And so hopefully that will help keep them on track. Here's an example of what one of the reminders looks like. There was an effort to gather site-specific information for these. So there are, in some cases, your site may have provided some information where it's slightly customized. For example, here on Pennington, you can see that it has specific information about, pick up the meals at D Building, Circle Drive, blah, 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 blah. Here's some directions and so on and so forth. So hopefully that will be helpful. And at each pickup, there is one form that you'll go back into, and it's sort of a weight log. So you'll enter the new weight at each time that they come to pick up foods. Then, of course, there's the adherence counseling form, which is made up of two different forms. The first is they finish the diet adherence log. You'll open the adherence counseling form, which will give you a summary of their adherence since the last meal pickup. And so here you can see the status of the adherence log that they filled out was complete. You can see a breakdown of the study foods and the percentage eaten that they provided. And then you can do some entry on evaluating the non-study foods that they entered into the log. Oops, sorry. And take a look at all of this. I'm really sorry. My computer is confusing myself and probably you, so forgive me for that. Great. So this form will contain a lot of really good information that I think many of you have seen and helped design. And so this is part one of that process. And go ahead, Becca.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to point out is that status of the adherence log. So if it says incomplete, you're going to want to go to the participant's diary, their daily log, and complete that with them. So you can see on this form, there's a direct link to that. And so you just click on it, and maybe they didn't indicate if they ate all their lunch or whatever it is. And so this is intended for you to use with the participant when they're picking up their meals to make sure that adherence log actually gets complete. And so then, of course, all of that information is going to load into this adherence counseling form. If it says complete, you don't need to actually work on completing the adherence log with the participant.
Great call out.
Yeah, okay. I think that's it.
Okay.
This is where you would document any counseling also that you would do with the participant. I don't know if we put that field in here. It's kind of a long form. This is a running form. I don't know if you guys remember the conversation we had about how, since everybody's meal pickups are different for each participant. Some people might be picking up on every 2 days or every 4 days or every 3 days. And so to have all of the information in one spot. So you'll see when you log into this form, it's day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 14. And it's for you to be able to kind of scroll back and see how they did on day 2 and day 1, so that you can take in all that information to actually provide the counseling. So there is the option to provide counseling on every single day. And maybe you're going to provide counseling about day 1 and about day 2, but it's also okay if you just provide counseling on day 3 about day 1 through 3. So that field, I don't think it's required. We should definitely check that out, Kate, that counseling field. But the form was designed because we needed, in the way it is, because we needed to have flexibility in the times in which kitchens need to, or participants need to pick up their meals.
Great. And then the second piece is the adherence check form, where it does have a link to that form, the counseling form that we just showed, as you can see here on the screen. But it'll be important to provide the actual pickup date and time, the number of days, and confirm that you reviewed it and provided coaching as needed. Here will also be a view of the weight log. It just pipes it in here to make it a little bit easier, but it's a direct pull from that other form where the data is entered. Anything else to say on this one, Becca?
I think, it's hard to show the whole form on a PowerPoint slide, but I think also below there is if you need to make any adjustments to their meal. So say it's been a week and they've gained 5 pounds and you need to adjust their diet, you would also indicate that in this form.
Yeah, great. Okay, any questions about those before we go to visit 2? Y'all have been good about asking them in real time. Oh, there is one in the chat, unless it's already been addressed. Oh, never mind. Okay. Okay, so visit 2. Once again, you'd want to weigh the participant, coming back to that same form where every weight will be logged in a different row in the table. Once again, you'd want to review the diet counseling form and the diet adherence log because they're coming in for visit 2 and they'll have been finishing up their diet.
One thing I want to mention though is that this is one thing that confused me, and maybe you guys are smarter than I am, but there's the visit 1 and the visit 2, and then there's the meal pickups. And so visit 1 and visit 2 are like the bookends of that diet period. So visit 1 is day 0 and visit 2 is day-ish, 14-ish. And then the meal pickups fall within that. And so this visit 2 is really that last day of the diet period. And so during that visit 2, you don't need to provide adherence counseling because it is the last day of that diet period. But it is making sure, you still want to make sure that the adherence log is complete. So if it does say incomplete there on that page, definitely go in and work with the participant to complete it so that we have that data.
Very good call out. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I'll let you keep going, Becca.
Yeah, and so this is of course going to be dependent. A lot of this is of course site dependent and who's going to do what at your site. But this of course is also the day of the DSMT, and so maybe you're involved with preparing and providing the DSMT meal. But do be aware that we have a separate DSMT MOP. It's not within the diet MOP. So there is a separate DSMT MOP. And of course, as we mentioned at the beginning of the call, if there's a change in that water, it will be documented in that DSMT MOP. And there are specific forms that need to be filled out related to the DSMT, but that's all laid out in the MOP as well.
Great. And finally, although I defer to you all on where we are in the process, we did provide access already to any of you who were on a list that needed access to REDCap to the demo system. And here's some key information here with a link to the demo site, the name of the project. And we did load a record in for each participant, a record in for each user. So you would have, and your name would be one of the records to use as your test. It might be, I think, in this case, working with your counterparts and whoever's doing what parts of the process, it'd be good to connect with them, but it is set up to be working the way it would in production. So you could test out some of these features and functionalities and all that good stuff. And of course, throughout the process, you can always reach out to the help desk. And you can also, what we've done for a lot of the clinical sites for Module 1 is create a Teams chat with the technical team so that if in real time, particularly with the first participants, if you have questions, even just questions, or if something's like not quite right, you can really immediately reach us. And we have a couple of staff there, so we usually can cross cover and give you real-time guidance or support. And so we do want to continue that in Module 2, particularly because of all the complexities. And I think that's it for us today, unless there are questions or anything else that Becca or Carolyn or others want to reiterate.
It's a lot of information. And
yes.
So even if you don't have questions today and you come up with questions in the future, if you've done some, or if you do some practicing in the staging environment and you come up with questions at that time, definitely reach out and we will get them answered.
Agree.
I actually do have a question. I think you went over it, but if you wouldn't mind repeating it. So for the meal pickup adherence check, and so at the bottom where it asks like if immediate diet changes were made and like say we need to add a unit food, then do we have to go back to the food table, the planned foods table, and add that? And then I guess how do we get that to show up immediately for the DDAL?
This is a great question. I'm going to revisit this functionality really quickly. We had a couple of folks, unless Sophie was able to join after all. Sophie is the most expert on that part of the system. So let me look really quickly, but I can make that a follow-up to really spell out the unit food part, because I think that is one piece that the presentation didn't get into, and it might help answer your question.
Okay.
And I'm not finding it quickly. So I'll definitely make that a key follow-up that we do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Becca and Kate, for working so hard on this. It's very obvious how much thought and time and programming has gone into all these forms, and really appreciate you guys and appreciate going through it with us today.
Thank you all for doing all of the things you all have done. I can only imagine. And yes, I hope as we work through this together, I look forward to making this, refining it the way it needs to be. And hopefully, yeah, if you have questions, always reach out. I'll go off camera and let you guys have 10 minutes back to your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kate.
Thank you.
Beth, what else do we have?
Well, I don't have anything else on my mind. What does everybody else have?
Oh, I just had a very quick question for Becca. I think this was addressed, but so this means we're cool to start using that part 2 screening form that's in the module 1 REDCap now. We can go ahead with that now.
I think it's live now. Is that right, Kate?
It's been live. I mean, we've had it.
There was an update to it again, I believe.
Oh,
There
okay,
was
so
a
it's
picture
different.
and a couple things that were not quite right. But yeah, it is live. The moving it them from module 1 to module 2 should be live Monday between 12 and 2, and we'll send out a communication. So if it's more convenient and you're doing both of those forms at once, it might be worth waiting, but otherwise that form is ready.
Got it.
Wait, what do you mean both forms at once?
Sorry, and this could be that some sites it's completely different people, but the module 2 and 3 recommendation form that actually pushes them to the module 2 system, that one will be functional and live on Monday for launch.
Okay.
So starting next week, like at our visit 2s, we can start doing that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Can we talk quickly about the physical activity? Because that was the main thing that changed in the form, right? Is that what you were going to say?
Yes. Well, I was also going to say that those participant-facing documents are on the MPH website in the IRB approved forms. So like the food list and the menu list, and what was the other one that's used, Beth, during the screener? That might be it. I think that's it.
Yeah, no, there's 3. There's the food list, the menu that you can go over with them, and the the diet expectations. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are all on the website. So make sure you pull those off so that you're able to use them in that part 2 screener. But yeah, so one of the big pieces that changed is the physical activity question. So prior to the change, there was just one question that asked about physical activity, and there are now 2 questions that ask about physical activity. There's one that says, that asks about your usual physical activity at school and at work. And then there's one that asks about your usual physical activity during leisure time. And so that question has to be asked twice, and there's different answer choices for each one. The one thing that we're working on, and I don't know if Carolyn, if you have an update since we met this morning, is what those definitions are for each of those activity levels, because there's some nuances in those. And so we've been working with some of the working groups to get those definitions refined. And Carolyn, I saw you come on camera. Do you have any updates on where we are with that?
Yeah, I'm fine tuning. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. My computer's telling me things. Yes, I think we're on the cusp of getting this nailed down. Bear with us, and I'll get that to Becca for your review and to see if that's in good standing, and then we can circulate more broadly.
And so we would eventually add those descriptions into that part 2 screener. Is that correct?
Yeah, probably at a later time, since the system, you know, we're really preparing to launch, but I doubt it'll make it for the Monday launch, but we'll try to get it.
But what we can do is provide it as we can provide the text to you, and so you can say, you know, this is what determines light physical activity, and this is what determines moderate physical activity, so that you can verbally explain it to participants. Is that correct, Carolyn?
Yeah, or just to help guide them in picking a category that seems to align with, you know, their kind of general lifestyle, daily activities.
I think that was the only main update. We did have some pictures in the wrong places. We had a picture of the cooler in the wrong screener. I can't remember if it was supposed to be in part one and now it's in part 2, or vice versa. And then the pictures of the containers as well, we had them in the wrong. We didn't actually have the picture of the containers in there. So those have been updated as well. So I think those are the main updates to that part 2 screener. So for those of you, I know that there were a very small number of people who completed the part 2 screener already. You'll probably need to reach back out to those participants, mainly to assess their physical activity level and anything else that you weren't able to do, especially like the food list and such, because that physical activity level does drive the DRI, the energy needs for the participant. And so we will definitely need that information. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay. Okay. If someone does the module 2-3 recommendation form, but all of that diet screener isn't filled out, will it still get pulled over to the M2 REDCap?
Good question. So I have to double check exactly what makes it complete, but I don't think I believe right now there's a send checkbox that Chelsea, you were in the other training, so I'm hoping you know what I'm talking about, but there's a send checkbox that initiates it moving them over, and I think we are not showing that if that form isn't completed, so you do have to do that first because there's so much information on there that's critical.
Okay.
And a warning is in its place if it sort of indicating that it needs to be completed. And that was a change that came after that training. So it's a late breaking update that just seemed like it made good sense.
If there are no other comments, I was going to mention one thing we found this week about the turkey. We were going to order it through US Foods as a special order, and we kind of kept getting a runaround from them. It was ordered, it's not available, all sorts of different responses and why, you know, they would say it was ordered and then it would never show up. So what we ended up doing, because Cuisine Solutions is agreeable to this, is setting up an account with them so that we do purchase like kind of through our hospital purchasing system. And they agree to set up account and agree to, I think a net 45 days for payment. And so for those of you who don't have credit cards that you can use with that company, which is also another great solution, we found that to be an option. So I just want to put that out there. Anybody else having trouble getting the turkey or solve any problems getting the turkey? No.
We can't get it. But we can't, yeah, I don't know. We're just not able to get anyone to, through our approved vendors to, because we can't buy directly from Cuisine.
They won't sign your,
No,
okay, okay, because they've been
they've ignored our.
Really?
Yeah,
Who's
so
your contact there by any chance?
I don't know. Dustin does all the purchasing, but he's always had to get their product through for Food Service Direct. So if you could send me an email, like with any kind of people or any kind of thing that I can pass along. Dustin's away till next week, but I feel like we've tried various things and they haven't worked. So if you have any new steps that maybe would work.
Yeah, we've been in contact with a rep there who's been very responsive. So I'll ask Ashley to forward you her information.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll forward it along and see. So far we haven't gotten anywhere, but we'll just keep making steps.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
I have kind of a totally unrelated question. So I know like we're doing module 3 and Alabama's doing module 3 and one of the California sites, is that right? And Pennington?
We are, Davis is.
Holly, how have you, and this can be a conversation for us like offline if I can call you, but how have you estimated your labor? How many people, how many
We are
guys?
so far from that. I mean, literally, I'm the only person working. We have no kitchen staff, we have no diet techs, we have no nothing. I do know that the only thing that's been discussed is that we are going to contract with an outside company that that we can do federal government contracts with to get CNAs for 24-hour nurses or CNAs. Okay. So I do know that that contract is being moved forward in terms of having at least 2 people, CNAs on site around the clock.
Yeah,
but
I'm
beyond
really
that,
just thinking kitchen staff, like just diet.
I just emailed Beth and Renee about this week because I'm trying to figure out how to staff our new kitchen, and they had pretty different numbers on opposite ends of the scale. And so I think it'd be good for us to all talk about this so that we can prepare, because I think, you know, for us doing it for 3 sites, I'm really trying to, we'll be scaling up, but what does that max limit look like? And is that feasible with staffing? Right now, based on Beth's numbers, we could do it. Based on Renee's numbers, there's absolutely no way. There's just no way. So I think that it's an important piece, an important recruitment piece, right? Of what we can base our numbers on.
Yeah, I would love to like add this to an agenda or to have like a smaller module 3 dietitians meeting to talk about it. Because I talked to Renee too, but she just told me she's staffing like 1 FTE per 4 participants, but I didn't see like, she didn't send me any math, and I'm just like not sure. I don't know, it's hard, like the diets are prepped in a way that it's hard to estimate per participant. It's easier to estimate like per how many times you're gonna run the diet over the next like 2.5, 3 years.
Totally, yeah.
So I just would love to, yeah, pick everyone's brain and talk about this, because I need to definitely plead a case to management as to why I need a 4th diet tech. because I know I do, but I need to be able to show why I do.
Can I get one, please?
We would normally estimate it takes an hour to prepare a research meal, but with this study and being able to prep in large batches and put them in the freezer, we estimated 20 minutes a meal. Basically 20 to 30 minutes a meal, and that's what I based my calculations on and looked
Is
at.
that for one tech, Beth?
One tech prepare
tech.
20 minutes of time.
Okay.
So
But
that
like, so
does not
that
include,
that makes sense, but that doesn't include the time to batch cook all of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like that is gonna, like, to make the orange diet, for us, we're gonna make like times 25. It is going to take like 4 days, probably,
Yeah.
like 4 days to make the orange diet.
Easily.
It's so
Times
labor
25.
intensive.
Yeah.
It's really hard for our site too, because this diet, this menu is so incredibly different from all of the other menus that have been historically done, where they're minimizing labor. And these are like serious, like they don't even have, I mean, I had to dig around to find muffin tins and like storage, you know what I mean? They're not baking and stuff like that. It's so this is just like a total, in terms of staffing, this is like a whole new beast in there. So it's true. It's a very labor intensive, especially orange, obviously. But that adds a consideration for sure.
Yeah, so maybe next Friday, Beth, or I don't know, at some point sooner rather than later, I would love to chat about everyone's numbers.
yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
It would help me make my pitch to, which I'm constantly in a constant state of pitching for staff. So this would be helpful for me too. Like, well, they're saying,
Yeah.
So it's not me saying this, it's, you know.
Right. Okay. So we'll hopefully see everybody on Monday, and maybe keep an eye on results. I don't know if any more results end up moving us an email out in the morning or something, if there's some results to evaluate before we discuss.
Sounds like a good plan.
All right. Let me know if you want some help, Becca. Okay.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.